It began with a text, then an email, then silence. By sunrise, the video had reached every corner of the internet. Charlotte West, 58-year-old biotech CEO, exchanging vows with Caleb Ryan, the man she had adopted at age 10. No context, just 15 minutes of footage cut down to 10 by a stranger, set to ominous music, entitled Power, Grooming, Marriage. Watch for yourself. Her phone buzzed nonstop. The office group chat went dark. Every news aggregator picked it up. She said nothing. Not to her team. Not to the press. Not even to Caleb. Because by the time she reached the front steps of her company's headquarters, she already knew. Everything had changed. The security guard didn't meet her eyes. Her nameplate had been removed from the door. And the receptionist, the same one she'd hired 2 years ago, offered only a half smile and the line that would define the rest of her week. Legal said, "You should head straight upstairs." That was the moment Charlotte understood. The world wasn't curious. It was convinced. And the only thing louder than the silence in the building was the noise building outside. The elevator ride felt longer than usual. Not because of the floors, because of the eyes. 2 interns stepped in behind her. Neither said a word. One glanced at her reflection in the mirrored panel, then away. On the 17th floor, the whispers started. Charlotte walked past cubicles she had personally designed, through hallways where she'd once been greeted with respect. Now, there were no greetings, just side glances, hushed voices, and sudden silences whenever she passed. She opened her office door. Inside, emptiness, no laptop, no files, no framed photo of the first product she ever launched, just a single envelope on the desk. Inside was a note from the board chair. "Pending investigation, we are placing you on administrative leave, effective immediately." No signature, no name. Just typed words on letterhead she'd helped design 18 years ago. No one had asked for a meeting. No one had called her in. They had decided. The same people who once applauded her resilience now treated her like a liability. One of her senior VPs passed by the open door. He paused. Their eyes met. He looked away first. Not out of shame, out of calculation. He still had a job to keep. Charlotte sat down in the empty room. No denial, no outburst, just a quiet exhale. They wouldn't ask questions, because questions meant risk, and no one in that building was willing to risk a thing for her now. By Friday, her access card stopped working. No explanation, no call, just a red light where there used to be green. Charlotte stood at the glass doors, once etched with her company's logo, and now her exclusion. Security let her in manually. No eye contact, no small talk. She walked to the executive suite. Her name was gone from the wall. In its place, interim transition office. Inside, her assistant's desk sat empty. Files she'd marked confidential were missing. Even her office chair had been replaced, like the body hadn't even gone cold. Later that day, a formal letter arrived via courier. "You are hereby terminated as Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately." They cited reputational risk. No misconduct, no policy violation, just public perception. That was the charge. That was the sentence. Her attorney called voice clipped. "They're protecting the company. It's not about guilt, it's about optics." She hung up without replying. That evening, she received one more email from Human Resources. "Please arrange to have your belongings collected by Monday. Security will escort the courier." They wouldn't even let her pack her own things. The woman who built the company from a borrowed lab and a second-hand printer was now reduced to a box of personal effects and a revoked ID. And through it all, not a single board member looked her in the eye. Charlotte didn't speak to the press. She didn't write a statement. She went straight to her lawyer. The firm was discreet, sharp, and expensive. The kind that handled things quietly until it was time not to. She laid out the facts. 18 years as CEO, no misconduct, no warning. Just a leaked wedding video and a termination letter. Her attorney listened, took notes, then asked the one question she had already answered in her heart. "Do you want to fight this?" She nodded once. The lawsuit was filed within the week. Wrongful termination, defamation, breach of contract. The news exploded again. Now it wasn't just CEO Mary's adopted son. It was she's suing the company she built. Opinion pieces poured in. Some called it brave. Others called it delusional. The board responded swiftly, with their own legal team in a public statement. Miss West's decision to engage in a relationship with a former dependent raises serious ethical concerns, which we believe justified our decision. They never used the word illegal, but they knew what that sentence would sound like to the public. They wanted distance, and they wanted blood, But Charlotte wanted something else. She wanted the truth on record, even if no one believed it. They didn't care about the lawsuit, they cared about the story. Charlotte West became a headline again, this time with teeth. Podcasts dissected her life. Late-night hosts mocked her vows. Morning panels debated whether love could ever justify what she'd done. They flashed old photos of Caleb at 13, standing beside her at company events. They paused on the way he looked at her, froze the image, zoomed in. Look closely, they urged. They replayed her wedding clip over and over, her hand on his cheek, the quiet way he whispered, "I do." They weren't reporting, they were building a narrative. She was no longer a CEO. She was a scandal. One journalist claimed an anonymous source said she'd always been controlling. Another called her a brilliant woman who made one disturbing choice. No one talked about the years in between. No one mentioned that Caleb was 24. No one asked them how long they waited. No one cared. Because the truth didn't trend. And Charlotte West, once the face of innovation, had become the center of a storm she couldn't calm. Not with logic, not with dignity, not even with silence. It wasn't just the media, it was the comments. Thousands of them. Charlotte stopped reading after the first few days, but Caleb didn't. At first he tried to stay above it, then he tried to explain, then he just watched. One post read, "She raised him to be her husband. That's not love, that's grooming." Another, "He's too brainwashed to know he's been manipulated." Even when defenders stepped in, they were drowned out. Screenshots of their wedding were turned into memes. Her face became a joke. His became a warning. They received emails with no subject lines, just slurs. They were told to move, to disappear, to be ashamed. And every time they went outside, someone was watching. At a restaurant, a woman pulled out her phone and filmed them in silence. At the pharmacy, a man muttered, "sick," under his breath. Online, people speculated about their intimacy, their past, even their legality. Reporters called Caleb's former teachers, digging, twisting, publishing. And no matter how calmly Charlotte tried to carry herself, she knew the narrative was no longer theirs, and the cruelty wasn't stopping. It was accelerating. The first to vanish were the neighbors. The couple next door stopped waving. The woman who used to drop off flowers from her garden left a clipped note in the mailbox. "Please don't involve us." Then came the professional silence. Mentors, former colleagues, people Charlotte had promoted, backed, defended over the years, they all went quiet. Some unfollowed her publicly. Others left messages that sounded supportive but led nowhere. "You're in my thoughts. Such a difficult situation. I hope you understand. I can't be involved." Even her attorney warned her gently, "Expect witnesses to get cold feet." At church, the pastor asked her to skip a few Sundays, just until things settle. One friend tried to be honest. "It's not that I believe the worst about you, but it's complicated, and people are watching." Caleb noticed it too. A childhood friend unfriended him. His old professor returned his email with a canned response. No one called to ask how they were coping. No one asked what the truth was. It wasn't fear, it was convenience. People preferred distance. It was easier to abandon them than risk standing beside them. It came on a Tuesday, a quiet knock. Charlotte opened the door to two strangers in dark coats, holding badges. "Child Protective Services," the woman said. "We'd like to ask a few questions about Mr. Ryan." Charlotte blinked. "He's 24. The man nodded. "We're aware, but due to the public nature of recent events, a referral was made." Caleb stepped into the room behind her, calm but tense. They asked about the timeline. When he moved in, when the relationship changed, why no one else was present at the wedding. They weren't shouting, they weren't rude, but they weren't listening either. Everything was framed like evidence, even the silence. They stayed for 43 minutes, took notes, recorded the conversation, and before they left, the woman said, "You should expect more inquiries. The situation is sensitive." They didn't say illegal, they didn't say wrong, but the implication hung in the air like smoke. After they left, Caleb stood at the kitchen sink for a long time, not speaking, just staring at his reflection in the faucet. Charlotte didn't touch him. She just sat at the table and listened to the sound of their life being dismantled, one knock at a time. The courtroom wasn't full, but the air was, thick with judgment. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but that didn't stop the stares. Charlotte sat beside her attorney, hair tied back, suit pressed, no jewelry, no expression. Caleb wasn't seated with her. He was asked not to appear, to minimize distraction. The company's legal team arrived in sharp suits and shallow smiles. They shook hands with the clerk. They laughed once, loud enough for her to hear. Then the hearing began. The judge addressed the case plainly. Miss Charlotte West v. Biomarin Corporation, concerning wrongful termination and reputational harm. She didn't flinch, but every time her name was spoken, it echoed in her chest. The company painted a picture, a CEO who blurred personal and professional boundaries, a woman who used her authority to blur lines, a scandal that, regardless of legality, damaged public trust. The jury shifted in their seats. Someone in the gallery whispered. Her lawyer objected twice, sustained, but the damage wasn't in the statements, it was in the room. The way people looked at her like they were already sure, not because they had evidence, because they had internet access. They asked her if she loved him. The question came from the defense, sharpened and slow. Miss West, were you in love with Caleb Ryan before he turned 18? She didn't blink. No. And when did your feelings change? Years later, after he graduated, after he moved out, after he came back. The lawyer smiled like her timeline was a puzzle missing a piece. Was there ever a written agreement? Anything to document when your relationship turned romantic? No. So we're expected to take your word? A pause. Yes, there it was. Not a crack in her voice, not a single tear, just truth. Unembellished, unapologetic. They brought up photos, her hand on his shoulder at age 14, him carrying her bag at a company retreat. The implication was clear. She'd been preparing him, one pixel at a time. But they never showed the pictures of him at her hospital bedside, or the notes he left on her fridge while she recovered, or the years of silence between them, full of care, but not closeness. They didn't want complexity. They wanted motive, and she refused to give it to them. The courtroom was still when the judge returned. No press inside. No audience beyond the handful who had stayed to watch a woman's reputation unravel in real time. Charlotte stood, her attorney beside her, the same lawyer who had cautioned her not to expect fairness, only formality. The judge's voice was calm, almost bored. After review of the evidence, arguments, and documentation presented by both parties, the court finds that the termination of Miss West's employment, while abrupt and damaging, does not rise to the level of wrongful termination under current state statute. Charlotte didn't move. The court does, however, acknowledge that defamatory statements were issued publicly by the defendant organization, statements which implied unlawful behavior without proof. A breath held in the room. For that reason, we rule in favor of the plaintiff for defamation of character. Damages awarded, $1.4 million. Whispers started in the back. It wasn't a full win, but it wasn't a loss. Not entirely. Outside, the headlines were immediate. Charlotte West awarded damages in defamation case. But within minutes they changed. Court sides with former CEO, but questions remain. No clear denial of grooming allegations. $1.4 million payout doesn't erase controversy. She stepped onto the courthouse steps to a wall of cameras. She said nothing. She didn't smile. She simply took Caleb's hand, he had waited just beyond the door, and walked down the steps slowly. One reporter shouted, "Would you do it all again?" Charlotte paused, turned to look, not at the press, but at him, and then answered softly, "Yes." And that was the quote they ran with. Not the ruling, not the nuance. Just one word, delivered with too much clarity to be misunderstood. The headlines faded fast, as they always do. By the next week, another scandal took the spotlight. Another face, another controversy. Charlotte and Caleb weren't news anymore, but they weren't forgotten. Everywhere they went, recognition followed, just a beat too late. A glance held a little too long, a whisper just after they passed. The silence spoke more than words. Restaurants turned them away with apologies about reservations they hadn't made. A local community board rejected her offer to fund a new reading center. No reason given. The private school where Caleb once volunteered sent a cold one-sentence email. "We will not be renewing placement for this academic year." Their neighborhood book club stopped meeting altogether. Even those who believed them, quietly, privately, didn't want to be seen with them. Charlotte sold the house, the one with the office where she built her company, the kitchen where Caleb had first told her he wanted to study architecture. They moved north. Quiet town, no interviews, no statements, just the two of them. He took freelance design work. She stopped checking LinkedIn, and every morning they walked a wooded trail together, coffee in hand, steps in sync, not as protest, not as defiance, but because when the world took everything they hadn't planned for, they still had what they chose, each other. And after all the noise, all the opinions, and all the shame that wasn't theirs to carry, they were still walking, still here, still holding on. Even in a quiet town, Google didn't forget. Caleb applied for an architectural apprenticeship at a local firm. Small, family-owned, nothing flashy. The interview went well. He left the office encouraged, lighter than he had felt in weeks. 3 days later, he received a brief email. "Thank you for your interest, Mr. Ryan. After further review, we've decided to pursue other candidates." He reread it twice. No reason given, no call. Just the familiar distance of polite rejection. That evening, he sat on the porch steps, staring at the gravel. Jaw tense, shoulders folded in. Charlotte brought him tea. Neither said much. But later, when she went to lock the door, she found him still there. "I thought starting over meant fresh chances," he said quietly. She sat beside him. "It does," she replied. "Just not right away." He laughed once, bitter but soft. "It's been 2 years. People still look at me like I was groomed." Charlotte didn't flinch, but she felt the weight of that word again. "I didn't rescue you," she said. "You know that." "I do. And I didn't raise you to become my husband." He turned toward her. "I know that too." They sat like that for a long time. Not in grief, not in rage, but in the quiet ache of being misunderstood by a world that had moved on, but never let them move forward. It was supposed to be a quiet gathering. Just 6 people. Neighbors, friendly enough. They'd exchanged pie recipes and trash day reminders. One had even dropped off a basket of apples last fall. So when the invitation arrived, handwritten, warm, Charlotte let herself hope. They brought a bottle of wine. Caleb wore a collared shirt. Charlotte baked her grandmother's cornbread recipe. The lights were on in the host's house when they arrived. The scent of roasted chicken floated from the open window, but when they knocked, nothing. No footsteps, no voices, just the soft shuffle of blinds being drawn. Caleb knocked again. Silence. Charlotte stood still, bottle in hand, the chill creeping into her fingers. A car door clicked behind them. Another neighbor stepped out, paused mid-stride, and turned back around without a word. They left the porch slowly. No confrontation, no message. Just exclusion, delivered without sound. They sat in their own kitchen that night, plates untouched. The cornbread cooled on the stove. "I thought we were past this," Caleb said finally. Charlotte stared at the empty places on the table. "We're not," she said. "They just learned to be quieter about it." 2 years had passed. Enough time for people to forget the details, but not the headline. Charlotte West had stopped checking the news long ago. But occasionally, someone from her old life would appear in her inbox. Brief, polished, always careful. "Hope you're well. Thinking of you. I regret not reaching out sooner. But never, I'm sorry. Not for the silence. Not for the complicity. Not for letting her be dragged alone." She once received a message from a former board member, the same man who had chaired the meeting that voted to remove her. He wrote, "You were always one of the smartest people I knew. I hope life is treating you kindly." She didn't reply, because kindness wasn't what she had needed back then. She had needed someone to say, "I know what we did was wrong." But no one said it. Not the journalists who twisted their story, not the neighbors who closed their doors, not the friends who left without warning. She had defended others her whole life, protected reputations, offered second chances, but when it was her turn, even those who knew the truth said nothing. And now, they wanted to reconnect. To check in, to pretend time had softened the wound they helped create. Charlotte read each message carefully, then quietly deleted them all, not out of spite, but clarity. If they couldn't stand beside her when it cost them something, they didn't deserve to sit beside her now. They stopped defending themselves. At first, they had tried, gently, carefully, to correct the record, in interviews, in court, in whispers to those who dared to ask. But people didn't want the truth. They wanted a version that confirmed their fears. So Charlotte and Caleb let them have it. Let them say what they would. Let them tweet, write, podcast, speculate. Let them wonder what kind of woman raises a boy and then marries him. Let them miss the years in between. Let them ignore the silence that filled that house after his 18th birthday, while he went away to grow, and she stayed behind to grieve a version of herself that could never be repaired. Let them overlook the space, the care, the waiting. Let them forget that love can come from unexpected places, and still be honest. Because no one asked how they lived. No one saw the grocery lists on the fridge, the back porch repairs, the arguments about dishes and late rent, and whose turn it was to sweep the snow. No one watched how they built something real in a world that refused to believe it could be. So they lived, in the quiet, in a rented house by the woods, where the mail still came, and the coffee still brewed, and the love, stripped of ceremony, scandal, and spectacle, still endured. They never gave the world another interview, never released a book, never filmed a rebuttal, because they had nothing left to prove and everything left to keep. Sometimes the world only sees the surface. It forgets to look deeper, to ask why, before it judges how. Charlotte West never set out to make a statement. She built a life, quietly, carefully, one day at a time. And when love came in an unexpected form, she didn't chase it. She simply didn't run from it. Not every story fits into the boxes we're given. But sometimes, what the world calls scandal is really just survival. And sometimes, two people holding hands in the dark know more about truth than 1,000 people shouting in the light. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear from you. Share in the comments. What moment in Charlotte West's journey moved you the most? And if you were listening closely, you might notice how often Charlotte West's name came up. Drop your answer in the comments. We may feature your name in a shout-out as a thank you for being part of our Fiction Echoes family. If you enjoy meaningful stories like this one, the next chapter is already waiting. Just click the video that's about to appear, and we'll see you there. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss a moment of what happens next.